Hi class, in 4.2 we will be comparing, ordering, estimating, and rounding with decimals. Learning targets for today, we'll be looking at comparing decimal representations, ordering decimals, estimating sums and differences of decimals, estimating decimals to benchmark numbers, and finishing out 4.2 with rounding decimals. Let's take a look at problem 1 on page 238. Number 1 says to look at the decimals that are shown. First, you want to shade the decimal squares in the hundredths grid for each decimal. Then you want to compare the decimals by writing greater than, less than, or equal to in the circles between the two decimals. So go ahead and do letter A, B, and C with your group members. If you take a look at letter A, we have 39 hundredths that is represented on the left model and 29 hundredths that is represented on the right model. 39 hundredths is greater than 29 hundredths. For letter B, we have 3 hundredths represented on the left model and 30 hundredths represented on the right model. So 3 hundredths would be less than 30 hundredths. If you take a look at letter C, we have 2 tenths that is represented in the left model, and we have 20 hundredths represented on the right model. 2 tenths would be equal to 20 hundredths. Let's go ahead and skip to problem 2 on page 242. Number 1 says that Janet is helping Miss Woods reshelf books in the library. Miss Woods asks Janet to put the following mathematics books in order from greatest to least on the mathematics shelf. So with your group members, I would like you to do letter A and letter B. Take a look at those decimals and put them in order from greatest to least. If you take a look at letter A, this is what the order of your decimals should look like. 516 and 84 hundredths, 516 and 24 hundredths, 516 and 9 hundredths, 513 and 99 hundredths, 513 and 98 hundredths, 513 and 64 hundredths, 512 and 78 hundredths, 512 and 36 hundredths, 512 and 35 hundredths, and finally 512 and 4 hundredths. For letter B, hopefully you just took a look at the digits in each place value and were able to order them based on each digit in the place value. If you look at the hundreds and the tens place, there's a 5 and a 1 in every single one of the numbers. So you start looking at that ones place and comparing each of the decimals in the ones place, and then in the tens place, and finally in that hundredths place. Let's go ahead and skip to page 244 and look at the top at number 4. Let's just write a rule now that states how we can determine when a decimal is greater than another decimal. All you want to do is compare the digits that are in each place value. So if you take a look at the 2 digits that I have written out, 512 and 78 hundredths, 512 and 4 hundredths. All 3 digits in the hundreds, in the tens, and in the ones place are all equal. So now we move on to that tens place, and you can see that the 7 is larger than the 0 in the tens place. So 512 and 78 hundredths would be greater than 512 and 4 hundredths. We are going to skip problem 3, so let's turn to problem 4 on page 247. If you take a look at problem 4, we are looking at benchmark decimals. And obviously, we know that benchmark decimals are going to be very similar to what we did when we worked with benchmark fractions. Benchmark decimals are common decimals you can use to estimate the value of other decimals. For example, 0, 5 tenths, and 1 are benchmark decimals that can be used to compare decimals. Remember, an estimate is not about being exactly correct, but it provides a ballpark figure something that is near to and could be, but is not expected to be exact. When you are looking to estimate the value of a decimal and when you are going to be using benchmark decimals, analyze the digits to the right of the decimal point. Take a look at the three examples. You can see how the first decimal is close to 0, that middle decimal is close to 0.5 or 5/10, and that third decimal is close to 1 whole. So go ahead and take a look at number 1 at the bottom of page 247. With your group members, I would like you to name the closest benchmark decimal for each decimal that is given. Go ahead and do letters A through J. Let's take a look at what you came up with for A through J. For letter A, you should have 0, B, you should have 1, C, you should have 5/10, D should be 1, E should be 0, F should be 5/10, G should be 0, H 5/10, I should be 1, and J should be 0. Let's go ahead and skip over to page 248 and take a look at number 3. Much like we did with benchmark fractions, we are going to be estimating now with benchmark decimals. So estimate each sum or difference for number 3 and explain how you determined your answer. Your explanation is simply just going to be writing the benchmark decimal underneath the decimal that is given and coming up with your estimated answer. So go ahead and just do letters A, B, and C for number 3 with your group members. So let's take a look at what you came up with for A through C. If you look at letter A, you can see that the first decimal would be close to 1. The second decimal would be close to 0.5. 1 minus 0.5 is going to give you your 5/10. For letter B, that first decimal is close to 0. The second decimal is close to 5/10. 0 plus 5/10 would give you 5/10 for your answer. And finally, for letter C, the first decimal is close to 5/10. The second decimal is also close to 5/10. That last decimal that you see would be close to 0. So 5/10 plus 5/10 plus 0 is going to give you an estimate of 1. Let's turn to page 250 and finish up for today and talk about rounding decimals. What I would like you to do is first, down at the bottom of the page, we are going to be writing our own rules for rounding. I'm going to kind of disregard what the directions say up at the top. So take a look at down at the bottom of the page, and I want you to write your rules for rounding down at the bottom of page 250 in that empty space. So here are the rounding rules that I would like you to follow. It is similar to what it says up at the top with a tiny little difference. I just don't like the way that some of the wording was in the top of the directions on page 250. So here's what I would like you to write down. First, we want to determine the place value that we are rounding to. The second thing we want to do is look to the right. And if the digit to the right is 4 or lower, then we want to make sure that we leave it alone. If the digit to the right is 5 or higher, then we want to round up. So go ahead and get these rounding rules written down. And now we can take a look at number 5 and complete the table by rounding each decimal to the given place value. Here is what your table should look like when you are finished after following the rounding rules. So take a look at the decimals that you came up with for the given place values that you needed to round to. That will be it today for lesson 4.2. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.